Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Val Myers, and I'm here with some friends. Today, we are talking about brighter days ahead. As a holistic mental health therapist, some of the things that I get a lot during this time of year is how can I help those with mental health issues such as depression and the winter blues, or as we get into the suicidal thinking. So today, we brought the team together and we want to talk about some of those things. So just to know, is we are clinical staff. We are not your medical providers. So during this talk, it is for educational purposes only, and we will not be uh, diagnosing, curing, or anything today like that. We are here just to give you some educational information. All right. So again, I'm Val Myers. I'm a clinical mental health counselor, and I'm the owner of the Kids Therapy Center. I have my friends Dwight and Dr. D. Go ahead and
Um,
introduce yourselves.
I guess
Excellent,
I'll start.
excellent.
Oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
D.
Dr. Dwight.
Dwight Franklin. I am an Eastern medicine physician and owner of the Franklin Family Wellness Institute right outside of Orlando, Florida. And we help a lot of kids with ADHD, autism, and various other brain health challenges. We work with adults too, but we primarily work with children.
And I'm Dr. D Wells. I'm a women's health practitioner. And much like Val and Dr. Dwight, all have patients that come in and they want to know if their hormones have anything to do with the way they feel during these winter months or during these seasonal time periods. Because we all say it. I'm doing exactly what I've always done. What changed? And that's why I'm super excited to be here today because we're going to talk about how the seasons do change those things, even if you feel like you're doing everything right.
Right. Yeah. So today's talk is we are going to look at kind of what the things behind depression and winter blues and suicidal thinking and some of those things. If you are somebody that is having these feelings, please reach out to your medical provider for further help. We are, especially if you have somebody that you're concerned of, we always want people to be safe. We can see that during this time of year, especially at the clinics, that we have a rise in depression. We're going to talk about a little bit why might that be? But we also have more stress during the holiday time and whatnot. So there's a variety of things that we might look at. So as a holistic counselor, I look at the management of stress and what's going on. Is the holidays a trigger for something else or the winter months? Or is there something a little bit deeper going on? And we're going to talk about like genetics and neurotransmitters and hormones, right? So, all the things that might better be able to help our mental health. One of the things that I've noticed over the years of having a specialty with depression and suicidal thinking is there's a lot more hope out there than people are given.
Hmm.
Meds don't always work. And these are some of the things that we want to bring to you today is what else can you do, right? So as a therapist, I might first assess for suicide and safety and whatnot, but then I'm also going to be assessing for, are they being social? Are they getting light during the day? Where are their neurotransmitter levels at? What is their vitamin D level at, right? I mean, how many people do we get in the clinic? It's like, go take a vitamin D, right? Let's get these levels up and so forth. So I'm going to pass this to Dwight and have him give us a little rundown on genetics and neurotransmitters. And we can learn more about how we can better help and understand the body related to depression. All right, Dwight, go ahead.
Thank you, Val. Yeah, so I've been seeing this a lot on Instagram and Facebook recently from colleagues. And they'll say, your low mood is not, your depression is not about your genetics. It's about the food you're eating or the lifestyle you're leading. And your low energy is not about your genetics. It's about, and they keep referring to our lifestyle as being the main factor in everything. And guess what? I agree, 100% agree with all of that. Where I think maybe we are at odds a little bit is that I believe they know genetics to be something that is told to a person, you have this gene variation, it's what it is. You're just going to have depression. You're just going to have this low energy. You're going to have these disorders, these diseases. It's kind of what's in the cards for you. That's not how we use genetics, right? So we use genetics in more of a functional manner. We want to understand how that person's body's working, how that person's brain is working at a very baseline genetic level. So, for instance, let's say a person has a low mood, they have depression. That low mood or depression could be coming from not producing enough serotonin that certain genes have responsibility over. Just to give you the numbers, that TPH2 is the gene that helps to produce something called 5-HTP that then goes on to become serotonin. Okay, that's one reason a person may have low mood or depression, but it's not the only reason. There may be a concern with how that person is receiving that neurotransmitter, that serotonin, into the neurons of the brain. Genes like HTR2A, 3A, 3B, those all play a factor in how well they're receiving serotonin. There may be concerns with how well that person is degrading their serotonin in the brain. Maybe a gene called MAOA is degrading their serotonin way too quickly for them because they have a fast variation of that gene. Okay. Each one of those situations has a different, if you want to call it treatment, if you want to call it a solution, they all have different solutions. Now, sometimes people that are really they're really having some really difficult times, they may have all of those playing in all at once. But when you know what a person's genetics are, when you do the genetic testing, you can see, oh, this person is just not creating enough serotonin. Let's give them 5-HTP, or let's give them vitamin D, because that's what that TPH2 gene requires to help create that 5-HTP, right? Maybe we give them omega-3s because that's what's needed for help with reception of serotonin in the brain. Maybe we give them curcumin because that's what's needed to help them not break down their serotonin so fast. So you can get really targeted with what you're doing when you know what a person's genetics are. And yes, it's not all about genetics. They could be having some concern in all of those areas with or without the genetic variations, but it gives us a lot of information on where best to start.
I love that you
Awesome.
brought
Thank
that
you.
up, Dr. Dwight. If I could just for a moment,
Sure.
talk about that, because these genes do play such a critical role in how not even just mood, but how metabolism plays. And I think sometimes it's important for us to pull back, not just as practitioners, but people that are interested in our own health, and kind of think about those genes and what kind of playground are we giving them? Because you mentioned things like curcumin and vitamin D or omegas, or things that can push into um, serotonin and melatonin production, like 5-HTP or tryptophans. And we want to think about, okay, now is my terrain. I often like to tell people that the issue is the tissue and how does your garden grow, right? So, what kind of environment are you creating with that lifestyle that Dr. Dwight talked about that would make sure that those genes behave exactly the way you want them to? Because it's not, and Dr. Dwight has mentioned this, it's not just about having a gene, it's about making sure you play your genes like a musical instrument. And how well we play them has a lot to do with the terrain or the nutrients or the lifestyle or the signaling that we give those genes. And so I love that you brought that up, because it's one thing to have a gene, and then it's something else to make sure that gene behaves the way we want it to. And that's within our capacity.
Absolutely. There's even a gene called GCH1 that produces something called biopterin, also called BH4. It's a component of serotonin and dopamine. If you have a GCH1 variation, it may lower your ability to make that BH4. However, in the presence of inflammation, your BH4 production just decreases drastically.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, you may have that a little bit of susceptibility to low mood or low focus, but it can be dramatically worse if you're not eating the right kinds of foods, if you're not eating those high antioxidant foods, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're eating high inflammatory foods. It will greatly change the way your body's ability and brain's ability to create that serotonin will be. So yeah, like you said, Dr. D, yes, the genes are really important to know, but it's having that lifestyle connected to it so that everything kind of works in unison.
100%, 100%.
And to add on to this, as a mental health counselor, when somebody comes to us in this state, typically what I see, like if they're just battling depression, that low energy, and it's really hard to kind of move on to the next. And with the way sometimes our medical field can handle things, it makes them seem like there's nothing else we can do. That depression resistant type uh services that is in your traditional field, like when we get them, it's just so different. We give them hope, like, okay, so yes, this can be genetically related, but we know that lifestyle and so many pieces of the puzzle can start to make them change and behave differently. And it is so fun to see somebody that battles depression or depression anxiety, and then all of a sudden they're functioning very well. And what's really fun about it is when they start to learn their body and be like, oh, it's that one. Okay, I think I'll try this. And if it's not that, they start to know which supplements or exercise or sunlight or whatever it might be helps them pull back out of it. And that is powerful. That's what I love about what we do, is giving people hope back to when they
Yeah.
battle depression or anxiety. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Val,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Dr. D. Um, I've had more patients than I can count that's come into the office and they're on SSRIs. And
Mhm.
if you know how an SSRI works, it slows down the reuptake of serotonin in the brain, so it stays in the brain longer. Um, but they're not getting any relief. And we'll do their neurotransmitter report, and their serotonin's in the toilet. And we look at their genes, and they're not making enough serotonin, right? And you can't inhibit the reuptake of something that's not there. If that serotonin is so low, that SSRI and I'm not a medical doctor, okay? I have worked with psychiatrists, I've worked with pediatricians, and I'm not against the medication whatsoever. For the right person, it works
Sure.
phenomenally. But that may not be the issue, that the reuptake may not be the issue with serotonin. It could be that they're not making enough. So they're trying to inhibit something that's not even there in the brain because it's not created enough.
Dwight, and I
Yeah.
think I want Dr. Dwight, I apologize. One thing I'd like people that are watching and participating today to also know is that it is possible with nutrients to turn genes that are behaving suboptimally down and or up. I'm sorry, genes that are not behaving. We can turn bad genes down. Let's make it simple, D.
Yeah.
We can turn bad genes down, and we can turn good genes up. Sometimes I think both in medicine, being a primary care physician, but also in when we look at some integrative approaches, sometimes things can be a bit of, you've probably heard me say this before, sometimes we bring a fire engine to a fire where we really only needed a fire extinguisher. And as a result of that, and that's what you're describing right now, as a result of that, sometimes those SSRIs become the problem because of a genetic polymorphism or a lack of appropriate nutrients that help us utilize that serotonin exactly the way we need to. We end up with an abundance of a compound, a chemical that we cannot use. And for every gimme, there's a gotcha. And so, what we may start to see in these individuals that are using what seems on the surface to be an appropriate SSRI, but there's a failure to use it properly within the brain, or to actually see those levels go up, that now what we see is the gotcha to SSRIs, which is leaky gut or a hyperpermeable gut, leading to only more inflammation, concerns with sensitivities with our environment, with our food, even leading to some downstream metabolic decline. And it's not that the SSRI was the wrong decision, it was that it didn't take in the totality of the patient enough to say, are there other things that we can do that build up or support this modality? Because it's okay to use pharmacology and pharmacokinetics as a modality, but we want to truly understand the patient well enough. And that's what I love about being invited to speak with the Kids Therapy Center and alongside with Dr. Franklin is that we are looking at a total body, a total physiology approach and saying, not only is this appropriate, but how could I make sure that I build up nutritionally and lifestyle enough that I would properly use this, whether it's a medication or it's a supplement or it's exercise therapy. We want to make sure that we understand how very complex, but also how very dynamic we are, and that there's a lot of levers that we can push.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, working day in and day out with, or even just having friends or colleagues, you always run into somebody who battles depression or even into the suicidal thinking, and that's the biggest concern that as I've had a family member pass from suicidal thinking, or from suicide, there's this concern that will the children have a hard time? And it's like, no, like we know so much these days to help make these genes and their lifestyle so that they don't struggle in those ways, right? I think of some of the stories that in practice, that I've heard, like I had one, he was battling suicidal thinking for years and was in a residential facility for it, and then went um, he came to the clinic to do lifestyle stuff. And it was amazing to see the changes in just a month, along with his medication, that started to make him not think that way as much, right? They started to calm down and he started to regulate the nervous system. And that to me, I think we're changing lives. We're changing lives of how people are thinking about mental health and ways that they can better themselves. It's so fun.
It's great.
All right. So along with that, we'll hand it over to you, Dr. D, that, the hormones that go around with it. Something that I'm really hoping that more and more people that are asking is that as we are working with especially our females, and they notice certain times in the months, or it's cyclical of that they are having more bouts of depression and whatnot. I have had females also say that so many days of the month they become suicidal, and it's the same time every month, So as we're in the mental health field, to again be asking more deep questions and be mindful of there is some other things that we can do. And that's where I'll hand it over to you, to Dr. D, and just talk a little bit about hormones.
Right. No, let's do that because I do think if when I introduced myself, one thing I had mentioned is that, whether it's weight gain or it's the seasonal affect or these temporal changes in our mood, we do hear as clinicians something very similar, which is I haven't done anything different. Like I can't point to anything, and yet here I am. But to your point, Val, there's also that female patient, and I don't want to leave men out here because men do fall underneath, and sometimes I'll say even suffer with cyclical changes that are also related to their hormones. And I'm going to talk about a hormone called adiponectin that kind of brings a lot of these things together. But going back to that female with a sense of low mood, and she can even pinpoint the day that it's going to happen. Well, I think the first thing I want women listening today, or someone that has an important woman in their close circle that you'd want to say, gosh, now I think there's something she can do with this, is progesterone is our feel-good hormone. Progesterone is the whittle your middle hormone. It's the I want to have sex hormone. It's the I can get a good night's sleep hormone. And that's one reason why when hormones or progesterone is very low at the beginning of a woman's cycle, she will have mood changes. She now has a higher amount of estrogen relative to the progesterone that she has, and she feels that emotionally. Some women will tell you that they feel less soft, or the people around her will tell her that she's less soft, less forgiving. when her progesterone is in a lower state. And then some will find themselves just simply moved to tears very quickly at the slightest thing. This is why Hallmark movies should not be released at Christmas time, at the holiday hours, right? Because we're all under the influence of this. And so, really, what I'm coming down to is everyone wants to know the answer to the question, what happens to your mood? What happens to your hormones? And then I want to talk about what happens also to your metabolism, when these seasons change, because you've already kind of given the punchline, Val, that daylight and sleep are really important because this isn't just about a winter slump. There's a real biologic shift that affects our mood, our food cravings, our sleep, our weight, and ultimately our female or our sex hormone balance. So I want to break it down without getting into the organic chemistry or the physiology of how hormones work. Um, and it comes down to one very clean key factor: light. Our brain, our eyes need to be exposed to light to balance our hormones, whether those are female hormones, whether those are male hormones. We think of those as our sex hormones. Whether we're talking about stress or blood sugar or sleep hormones, it all comes down to the quality of light that we receive. But what happens during these seasonal months, right? What happens during this time period? Daylight gets shorter, and your biology, your hormones, your mood, it notices immediately that it has less light exposure. You may find yourself not so much going to bed later, but wondering why you're saying to yourself or your family members, why does it feel so late? Right? It's only 5 o'clock outside, and yet it feels so late. That's a lack of light exposure that makes us feel energetic, that helps us manage our stress hormones like cortisol, that helps us create healthy sleep hormones, energy hormones, blood sugar management, and sex hormones. One thing that's happening without that daily light exposure, and you'll often hear me refer to it in lecture after lecture as early morning light. Well, these months tend to kind of give us a double whammy because when cortisol levels, our stress hormone, are elevated or are not properly inhibited by a healthy night's sleep, we wake up later in the morning. And it means that we have less exposure, not just to daylight savings time, but we have actually less exposure to light if we're getting out of bed later because we have low basal cortisol levels. We just can't seem to get up. They're not waking us up in time. Well, something that's key to that is something that Dr. Franklin brought up, which is serotonin levels. During these months when we are not exposed to as much daylight, our serotonin level drops. Our melatonin rises, which is why you're curious about like how did it get so late and it's not, or why does it feel so late and it's only 5 o'clock. The interesting thing about melatonin rising is it's doing it to counter the impact of cortisol, which is also going up. Why? Because that serotonin has dropped. So one thing that's a double whammy with melatonin is we say, oh, we just need to get a good night's sleep, and we do. Unfortunately, in these winter months, melatonin starts to actually raise our body temperature. We have a harder time sleeping. It's almost trying to like put on its like boxing gloves because it knows it has to go into the ring with cortisol and it has to go into the ring without having kind of its backup of that daylight in the morning. So the first thing I want you guys to know, if you want to regulate hormones, especially during these months, we need to consider maintaining a very healthy sleep routine so that we send physical signals to our body to get a good night's sleep so that melatonin does not raise your temperature at night, does not encourage you to eat more food when your blood sugar and your insulin levels, those are the two hormones that help you regulate your blood glucose levels and therefore your weight, they are not in a combative mode with your sleep hormones. So by implementing a sleep routine that includes waking up to early morning light. So I've got a tip for everybody, especially as I think of women and men that want to see their sex hormones perform better for them, whether that's for motivation, it's for exercise at the gym, is I need you to crack your curtains in the morning so that you get exposure to that first morning light. It's never fun to wake up to a an alarm clock. It's never fun to wake up to an alarm clock. So even if you use one, that's fine. But one thing that you can do to ease yourself in and send a really great signal to your blood sugar, to your insulin, to your stress hormones, that cortisol, and then ultimately, and I promise I'm coming around to this, ultimately, when those three things are in order, your sex hormones fall into place. Your sex hormones, your female hormones, the ones that regulate your cycle, the ones that regulate your motivation, the ones that regulate your ability to pick up heavy things and put them back down again, are intimately connected to how well did you sleep and how well do you manage stress and how well do you manage your blood sugar. It's critical that we get one, a good night's sleep, two, that we do that and stimulate our body and our brain to wake up and be exposed to first morning light, because that first morning light is not just telling melatonin how to behave in the next over the next 12 hours to help you get a good night's sleep. That first morning light is also the original signal to the brain through the eyes that we need to start regulating our blood sugar and our insulin. That cortisol no longer needs to be in competition with insulin, that it is okay that it rises naturally at this point so that you feel better motivated. You're better adept at regulating your blood sugar. Now you're better adept at regulating inflammation. We see this in large cohort studies be hugely beneficial to get individuals to pull themselves out of a seasonal affective slump. And notice less impact of their female hormones or less decline in motivation or physical stamina, whether that's in the gym or just getting your stuff done, right? That's where those male hormones come in, and it's why I didn't want anyone to miss um, that. While I'm a women's health practitioner, I often have to manage and support men's sexual health, men's metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, those sorts of things. So your internal clock is really where I would focus on this. Because if your circadian rhythm, those sleep habits start to change, that's not just sleep quality, it's so much more, because your circadian rhythm is responsible for your temperature, your regulation of appetite, regulation of blood sugar, receptivity to those sex hormones. So while we might think about things that support sex hormones, I'm going to tell you, if you can target those three things first, by the insulin, the sleep, the good night sleep, and anti-stress hormones, or blocking the impact of stress hormones on the body, now you're better prepared to manage mood, to manage weight, to manage inflammation, and ultimately to see benefit of a balance through your sex hormones.
Yeah, awesome. I think that when somebody is in the state of depression or whatever, what is so easy about light is that it's like, I want you to just get up and go to the window, right?
Mhm.
And then I might, as a therapist, I might add in some box breathing, right? And some of those deep breaths and stuff like that with it. But uh, that's, it's a great way to naturally start to wake in the morning. And what do? And so instead of just laying on your phone, go to the window, start doing some of these things. I then, as you talk about insulin and stuff, we practice low glycemic eating in our clinics. And it's like, let's try to get some whole foods in this body. Let's try to get some protein and fruits and vegetables. Because the other thing that happens is their diet might slide, right? And so I'm right away monitoring, are we eating and how much are we eating? Because those things sometimes we tend to see overeating or
Yeah.
undereating,
Well,
and things that are easy.
yeah. And I think it's important for people to know that while melatonin fights the fact that it has not seen a great deal of light, that it hasn't gotten the stimulation that it needs, we tend to move towards overeating. We tend to move towards those higher temperatures at night, which make it difficult for us to sleep. So I do think, this comes, and I know that it comes down to, you know, um, when cortisol timing is off, when stress hormones are off, because you'd mentioned that stress is such a big part of this season as well, we feel off. So I agree. We need to think about getting first morning light. That's that crack that we want in the curtains, right? I love that you brought up the importance of a protein first in the morning. That really is a critical part. You've heard me say this before, I think, Val, but maybe not everybody has. Fat and carbohydrates are the body's energy source. Protein is the only one that rebuilds your spare parts. Protein is the only one that is looking at repair as its critical player. And how do I get those hormones back in line? That comes from protein. How do I give these building blocks? When Dr. Dwight talks about 5-HTP or tryptophan, the ready sources of that are are complete proteins, getting them in a sufficient amount. I think another tip for people is to use things like green tea or a really polyphenol, think of very purple, antioxidant rich teas over coffee, um, because we end up not getting that kind of 3 o'clock slump when we don't try to like kick ourselves into gear with coffee in the morning. But I'll tell you, I think one of the things that's missing, and you mentioned it earlier, from people's regimen is a sufficient amount of vitamin D. I don't know that everyone is aware that vitamin D is not just critical for your immune system, it is critical also for your mood. But I think something that doesn't get enough play or airtime is that vitamin D is incredibly important for getting a good night's sleep. Melatonin and vitamin D are very similar to each other. It's why melatonin can be so good for gut health and immune function in the gut, for the same reason that vitamin D can be so great for a healthy night's sleep and helping us manage stress or hormones that are too high and preventing us from sleeping. And so it doesn't have to be an absurd cocktail. It can be things that are in your pantry right now and getting a good vitamin D supplement. I do want to point out something that Dr. Dwight mentioned, how important curcumin is. Curcumin is one of those antioxidants that lowers the barrier of inflammation, and that's a good thing in this case. Curcumin is one of those things that can help us gain more access to neurotransmitters. It's one of those things that can help individuals manage inflammation, immunity, cognitive, synaptic functioning much better. So it doesn't have to be a difficult cocktail. It can be first morning light, vitamin D, and curcumin.
Yes, those are some of the top things that I use in the clinic too. When you look at curcumin and just the research behind it with comparable to, the right strength, is it the whole curcuminoid or the BCM 95 and equal to Prozac, right? And I see that over and over and over again. I also see that low vitamin D, and lots of times, especially here in North Dakota, people are like, well, we have winter for 8 months out of the year. You should be supplement vitamin D. We know that if you're in Florida with Dwight, you should be supplement vitamin D, right? That there's a lot of things that go around vitamin D and absorption and utilization And it's not always just sunlight. Don't get me wrong, I love me some sunlight, like we talked about a
Mhm.
little bit ago, right? But there's so many other things that go along with this. And what I love about it is that when people start to realize that their number is low in vitamin D and they take it, they feel their mood change, they feel more energy. And like you said, that pairing with melatonin, they are sleeping better, and it's pretty fun to see some of those changes. Curcumin, I see very similar things. We see those low moods and whatnot. Now, obviously, we'll talk. If you see us on other talks, we talk about a variety of supplements, but we do have that is one of my favorite with vitamin D, with depression, and then I'm trying to get them sunlight. I'm trying to get them to socialize, and I'm trying to get them to eat whole foods, some real food here, right? Just to get that nutrition in. And it is a game changer. People see much more relief at a very quick pace and with very limited side effects, right? And
Right.
that's what's fun about it. Yeah. All right. Um, we are coming in for a close here. I want to thank everybody for joining. You can follow us at the Kids Therapy Center. You can see Dr. D and Dwight at TKTC Training Institute as well. We will be sending out the recording for everybody that's on, and we will have this will be a free video that we will have in our learning vault, as we call it, on the website. Thanks again for everybody joining, and have a great day.
Awesome.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much. All right.
Recording again.
Am I
I hit
recording?
it twice.